Do we have Chairman Booker online?
Doesn't look like it yet.
Who is our vice chair?
I've been running them when he's not here. If you want me to take this over, Patrick.
Yep. Why don't you start us off?
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Yep. A call to order the Public Safety Committee for Thursday, November 19th, 2020. It is 5:34 p.m. We are meeting virtually. I'll go ahead and call the roll. Mr. Westcott? No. Mr. Zintak?
Here.
Mr. Arena?
Here.
Ms. Gorel?
Present.
Ms. Red?
Present.
Myself, Dan Fellers. We have a quorum. Do we have any public comment tonight, Mr. Thompson?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll move past that to item D, a resolution extending proclamation declaring the county of Winnebago, Illinois, a disaster area for coronavirus response. And may I please have a motion?
So moved.
A motion by Ms. Gorel. May I please have a second? Seconded by Mr. Zintak. Any discussion on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make one recommendation before we begin discussion on this resolution, and it may become part of the discussion, but I would suggest that the period of the proclamation be extended, not through December 31st of 2020, but April 1st of 2021. I think it will get us through an more extended period of time. And I think if it's only extended through December 31st, I think we'll be back again in another month to extend it further. So I would recommend that we extend it through April 1st of 2021. Thank you.
All right, so to bring this for a discussion, I would need an amendment from a board member to amend this to extend through April 1st, 2021, rather than December 31st. I have a motion by Ms. Gorel. May I have a second, please? A second by Mr. Zintak. I see Mr. Booker is here. Mr. Booker, if you would like to take over.
All right. I just heard you. Thank you, Mr. Fellers. I appreciate you filling in again. My computer's running really slow.
No problem. Let me just give you a quick fact fill on this one. We have put the resolution, a motion in a second to put the resolution before the committee. At Mr. Thompson's suggestion, an amendment has been made to this resolution to extend it through April 1st, 2021, rather than the current date of December 31st, 2020. That amendment has been motioned and seconded, and we are now up for discussion. I will turn the meeting back over to you.
Great. Thank you again, Mr. Fellers. Sounds real good. So we got a motion and a second.
Yes, you do, to extend it, to April 1st of 2021.
Right. Hearing no discussion.
I just have, sorry, Mr. Booker, I have one question.
All right.
And
Mr. Arena also. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you. If we extend this to April 1st, 2021, and for whatever reason, we see the need to, or the situation would, allow us to rescind it. Can we rescind this and change the date, to a shorter time later if necessary?
The board can rescind it at any point.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be voting no on this amendment. This disaster declaration activates our emergency operation plan. That plan puts certain responsibilities on the chairman. I think Chairman-elect Chiarelli has not had a chance to see that plan yet, last I spoke to him. So I'm unwilling to vote for something that's going to affect him. I think considering that we're having a change in leadership, he should be the one to declare the declaration after he's had a chance to review everything. So I'm opposed to this amendment. Thank you.
All right. And is there anyone else with question or concern? Ms. Gorel, go ahead.
That would be wonderful, but whether we have the chairman we have now or we have a new chairman, this maintains just the way it is. I don't understand why there's so much fuss over this declaration, because of the fact the one thing you don't want to happen is we go into some type of a crisis and we don't have this in place. That could be worse than this chairman or that chairman. With Mr. Ciccarelli, he's with the city anyway, and he knows what this is, and so he shouldn't have a problem with it. But this needs to go until April 1st. We don't know at all when this crisis might get over. And like Mr. Thompson said, we can always rescind it. But this could also, this could also go into flooding. If we have that come spring, that could also cover that. Can it, Dr. Martell?
Well, I'll interrupt. I think that this is very specific to the coronavirus. So I think if there were a disaster declaration
It would have to be
or
otherwise.
any other purpose, I think it would have to be done separately.
But may I speak or ask to provide some additional context? Is remember, this would also cover your initial distribution of vaccine, right? We are optimistic that we will be seeing vaccine starting at least in the first quarter of the calendar year 2021. Hard to believe, right? But so I think that we really, I'm concerned about anything lapsing that we don't keep track on.
Right. Thank you. Did that answer your question, Ms. Gorel?
Yes, and what she's saying is absolutely right. But I also see Mr. Fellers wants to speak too.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Fellers, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to add on to this, of course, because it isn't as if our emergency response plan is something that can change, right? That is something that is set in stone, and this needs to be activated. So whether the incoming chairman, wants these duties or not, I mean, these are things that we need to do because the plan is something that that has been finalized, and it's not really something that we're going to sit there and try to pick apart or debate before we make another emergency declaration. So we need to pass this, and we need to pass this today.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fellers. Anyone else? I don't see any hands yet. Is there anyone that I can't see that would like to speak on it? All right. We've got a motion and a second. We've had very, very good discussion both ways. Very good discussion. Both points covered very well. All those in favor of the resolution for the proclamation, say aye.
Hold on. We need to, it's for the amendment first.
The amendment. Oh, I've lost it.
We're extending it till April 21st.
The amendment to extend to April 21st.
April
of
1st.
2021.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed?
I'm opposed.
We've got one opposition, Mr. Arena. The amendment passes.
Now you have to vote for the whole thing, don't you? The amended copy?
The amended motion.
Yes. So now need a motion.
We have
for
it.
the-
We have it. We can just discuss or vote.
I'm sorry.
We can just discuss it or vote on the amended resolution.
Right. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion on it, we can vote then, correct?
Correct.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Mr. Arena, being the only opposition, motion carries. And I've lost my agenda. I think that was the only item on the agenda, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, so see, is there any other business for the Public Safety Committee? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Got a motion by Mr. Fellers, second by Mr. Zintak. All those in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned as a Public Safety Committee. Thank you again, Mr. Fellers.
Excuse me, we will return with the Public Safety and Finance after the Personnel and Policy Committee, correct?
That is correct. And I
So
believe,
don't vote
Chairman-
yet.
and I believe Chairman Haney will now call to order the county board meeting.
Yes, thanks, Pat. So we'll go ahead and call the special meeting of the board to order. There's no agenda changes. The only thing I'll ask for a little latitude on is that when we have Dr. Martell share any updates, let's do that as part of the discussion around the actual extending the disaster declaration. So we'll kind of move the presentation into the committee discussion and just kind of go back and forth as we need to there. With that, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster? Mr. Westcott? Mr. Westcott? Mr. Zintak?
Present.
Mr. Arena? I know Mr. Arena was on the call earlier. Mr. Billich? Mr. Billich? Mr. Booker?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Butita? Mr. Butita? Mrs. Crosby?
Here.
Mr. Fellers?
Here.
Mr. Fiducia?
Here.
Mr. Girl?
Here.
Mrs. Gorel?
Present.
Mr. Hoffman? I know he was on the call
Present.
earlier. Mr. Hoffman?
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
President, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Mr. McDonald?
Here.
Mr. Neighbors?
Here.
Mrs. Red?
Here.
Mr. Salgado?
Present.
Mr. Schultz?
Here.
Mr. Tassoni?
Present.
Again, I'm just going to confirm we have absent Mr. Billich, Mr. Butita, Mr. Webster, and Mr. Westcott. Mr. Chairman, that would be 16 present, 4 absent, sir.
Thank you, Clerk Gamal. We'll go right into, we do not have any public comment. So we'll move into the one action item, and that's understanding committee reports, public safety. As we saw in the last committee meeting, there was an amendment to the item that's before the board this evening. The deadline, if the board would choose to extend the declaration that was made last Friday, it was originally stated, not sure how that arbitrary date of December 31st was arrived at, but that was the date that was originally on the item that went to committee, and that was amended in committee to then, I believe, be April 1st. So what will come to committee is an April 1st extension through April 1st of 2021, if the board takes action this evening. So with that, I will go to Mr. Booker for the item. Mr. Booker, and then we'll definitely give the floor to Dr. Martell as well. Mr. Booker, are you there?
Yes. I just rushed in from work, and the item of the proclamation to declare disaster to extend from December 31st to April 21st is
April 1st, Mr. Booker.
April 1st. Thank you. Mr. Thompson, I see that you had your hand up. Would you be able to assist on that?
No, I was just trying to indicate it was April 1st.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Real good. And it's to, it provides any assistance from the federal government as far as equipment and essential medical items for Winnebago County. I believe it also helps to establish our Emergency Operations Center at the Sheriff's Department. Dr. Martell, is there anything else you'd like to add with that?
No, I think that's appropriate summary and allows us to begin the planning. As you know, our Emergency Operations Center, since really the last week, has gone into, along with the state emergency operations, is running now at full activation level in response to the increasing hospitalization. And on a more optimistic note, we are planning for the receipt of the vaccine at the end of December, beginning of the 2021 calendar year.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Martell. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Dr. Martell, I just have one quick question. The public testing centers that we have set up within Rockford and in Winnebago County, were those created through the previous emergency declarations that were made using to be able to purchase supplies and set those funds, or was that done separately?
No, Mr. Fellers, it was done, that's actually been stood up by the state operations. And then in terms of I'm going to say the one at the University of Illinois College of Health Sciences, that is a state-run community-based testing site. And the one on Rockton Avenue is run by Crusader Community Health, who does apply for state assets in terms of supplies and funding for those. So through the emergency declaration, they can make a valid, let's say, claim for reimbursement for expenses.
Okay, so the emergency declaration allows them to make their claim for reimbursement. Thank you.
Correct.
Thank you. Chairman Haney, yes, I was just going to go to you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just really quick. So back in March, we made the initial declaration and the board extended that declaration on multiple occasions. At some point in the midsummer, the emergency declaration expired, and I don't have the exact date, but it expired. And as of last Thursday, when we had our board meeting, this was not something that I was actively discussing with Dr. Martell, but I did receive outreach from her office on Friday, the day after our last board meeting. And we discussed what's going on in the community with the increase in cases, the increase in the hospitalizations, and as well as the other items mentioned. And so the request was made to make an initial declaration, which the chairman could do, but that's only good for 7 days. And now it's on up to the board if they want to extend that declaration or not, and of course to when, and that the when is April 1. So that's the part I knew. If it would have been on my radar last Thursday, I would have mentioned it, but it was a Friday morning discussion, and we took action that day.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's something that it's one of those where the saying that fits is it's better to have it, not need it, than to need it and not have it.
Very well said, Mr. Booker. I see Mr. Kelly. Go ahead, Mr. Kelly. Oh, unmute yourself, Mr. Kelly. I think he just hung up. Oh, there he is. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Mr. Kelly.
I think he's having generalized audio issues, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll come back to Dave if he gets back with us. Is there any other, is there any other questions for Dr. Martell around this issue? Dave, are you back with us? Do you want to, Mr. Kelly, you want to say anything? Go ahead. Go ahead. You can talk, Dave. I think you're unmuted. I guess not. Can't hear you. I'm sorry. We'll hold off on that. So that's all we got. I don't see any other hands up. Mr. Booker, would you like to make the motion then?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to extend the emergency declaration for Winnebago County
Okay, we got a motion by Mr. Booker on extending the declaration, and that declaration would go till April 1st of 2021. I see a second by Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Girl. Thank you very much. The item is now before the board for discussion, formal discussion or questions. Any discussion or questions by board members? I do not see any hands up or any board members wishing to engage. So with that, we'll take the vote. Are there any board members who are opposed to this motion?
I'm opposed.
So we'll
Arena.
ask Clerk Gumow to cast a no vote for Mr. Arena. Are there any other no votes? Mr. Zintak is a no vote as well. Are there any other no votes besides Mr. Arena and Mr. Zintak, so we get the record correct? I do not hear any objection, further objection, so I will ask Clerk Gumow to cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes with two dissenters. Thank you very much. Anything else from your committee, Mr. Booker?
No, Chairman, that concludes our committee.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, there's no other action items for this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I got a motion by Mr. Fellers and a second by Mr. Zintak. Oh, Mr. Billick has joined us. Mr. Billick, we'll add him to the attendance, but he did not vote on the prior item. Would you?
I was in on that. I was in for the other item. I was actually on the stream when the other item was being voted on.
Okay, so would you like to vote on that then?
I was with the yes votes. It's fine.
Okay, a yes vote for Mr. Billick. So unless there's opposition, I think we allow our board member to vote on that since he jumped in and was following the discussion. So we'll cast a yes vote for Mr. Billick and all other board members with the two exceptions noted. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Could I get a motion, Mr. Fellers, a second by Mr. Girl? Are there any board members opposed to adjourning? Seeing no objection, we've adjourned the special board meeting. Thank you very much for your latitude in shoving this into the committee agenda this evening. Have a good evening.
And I thank you all. Stay safe and have a great day.
Have a good evening,
Happy
everyone.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, Chairman Fiducia will now go into personnel and policies.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'd like to call order Personnel and Policies Committee Thursday, November 19th, 2020. And we'll say it's at 6 o'clock. I myself am present. Mr. Webster? Mr. Hoffman? I saw him there. And, Mrs. Gorel? Did everybody leave me? Everybody did bail on me here?
I'm here.
Okay, we'll try this again. Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Webster? Mrs. Gorel? Mrs. Red?
Present.
Okay, Mr. Kelly? Here. Great, and Mr. Arena?
Here.
Mrs. Gorel is online.
Yeah,
She is present.
I've got her and I see Mr. Kelly. I see Mr. Kelly here, so I assume we're all here. Okay, the first, I believe we do have a quorum. First order of business is approval of minutes from July 21st and August 18th, 2020. And may I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Kelly, seconded by somebody. Seconded by
Second.
Mrs. Red. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, the minutes are approved. Mr. Thompson, were there any public comments?
No, there are no public comments this evening, Mr. Chairman, but there is one revision to the agenda. Item F should be removed from the agenda, so there will be no action on item F.
So noted. So we
Okay,
can
thank you.
move straight, we can move straight to item E, and that's a resolution authorizing the execution of a renewal agreement with Arthur J. Gallagher for property casualty and workers' comp. May I have a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Motion by Mrs. Gurl, seconded by Mr. Kelly. Discussion. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yes, I'll just say a few words, and I know our HR director is online. This is a renewal of the property and casualty insurance policies, including the workers' compensation for December 1st, 2020 through November 30th of 2021. The information regarding the renewal and the different various policies that are included in this are as part of your attachment. There is approximately $110,000 increase in the renewal, and that is due to some of our loss history and also the coronavirus pandemic. And this has been reviewed by the Human Resources Department, Mr. Chapman and myself, and we recommend this for approval. And I don't know if the HR director, Debbie Crozier, has any additional items to add, but I would recommend approval of this.
The only thing I have additional to add was, and it also included all of the storms, all of the inclement weather that we had.
Thank you, Debbie. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Do I have any other board members that have comments or questions reference this? Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my appeal would be, and I'm sure you would just do this routinely, but because part of the rationale for the dramatic increase is related to the COVID situation, if we could revisit the quote that comes a year from now in the context of trying to catch a break going the other direction, if we're in a better place as it relates to that, I think that would be wise. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Thompson, could you so note that?
So noted, thank you.
All right, let's do it this way. If I have any other, we have any to comment on this? Hearing none, if you're opposed to this, signify by saying aye. Otherwise, let the record reflect that this motion passes. Hearing none, the motion passes. We're going to go directly to item G, an ordinance amending section 62 of the County Code of Ordinances. May I have a motion?
I'll move.
By Mr. Kelly, seconded by
Second.
Me.
Mrs. Mr. Let the record reflect Mr. Webster is now present. We'll go with Mrs. Gurl on that. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to add on that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This ordinance amendment, and actually both G and H, the ordinance amendment for Chapter 62, and then the next agenda item, which I can speak to separately, but Chapter 2 in addition. These amendments clarify the reporting relationship between the county administrator and the Human Resources Director and the CFO position. And in reviewing the ordinances prior to the commencement of the recruitment for the CFO position, which is currently underway, I noted some discrepancies in both the ordinance defining the CFO position and the Human Resources Director position. And these amendments simply clarify the reporting relationship between the Human Resources Director and the CFO position.
Very good.
Very good. Any comments from any, or any questions from any of the committee members?
The only comment I have, I thought you did on the, I think it's a chapter 2. It's very concise. In reading it over, you really spelled out the duties. I only have one question. Since this is finance, do we bond our people for this? Will that person be bonded?
Sure.
Well, I would defer to Mr. Kurlinkus on that. I know all our elected officials are bonded, but the appointed officials, Dave, I'm not so sure they are, but do you want to weigh in on that?
I was looking for my mute button, sorry. Yeah, and I think we have some kind of loss insurance policy too on it, and I'm looking to Steve, because when we had the issue with the former purchasing director a couple of years ago, we had I don't think it was a bond. I think it was an insurance policy. Is that right, Steve?
Yes, there is a crime and theft policy that cover pretty much all the employees with the county.
Very good. It's nice to know that.
So, Mr. Chairman, unless there's objection, unless it breaks a parliamentary rule, if you want to act on these together or take them up separately, either way. But they're both identical.
I would be okay with taking them together due to the fact that chapter 2 is the same, is part of chapter 62. So I'd be okay with that. Would there be any objections by the committee if we did that? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and do it that way. And I'll let the committee know that the 62 and chapter 62 and chapter 2 were vetted out by Mr. Thompson and Mr. Arena and Mr. Kolinkus. So I have full confidence that they're going to be excellent. Is there any other comment from the committee reference items G and H? Hearing none, if anybody's opposed, signify by saying aye. Other than that, let the record reflect that it passes. Okay, items G and H pass. Are there any other matters to come before this committee?
No, sir.
Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Webster, seconded by Mr. Kelly. Anybody opposed, speak up. Otherwise, good evening.
Good evening. Happy Thanksgiving to you all.
And now Chairman Booker and Chairman Salgado will go into a combined meeting of the Public Safety and Finance Committees.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I see Mr. Salgado's on board, ready to go. Mr. Salgado, would you like for me to move forward with our agenda?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. We've got a call to order for the combined meeting of the Public Safety Committee and the Finance Committee. I'll ask for a roll call from the Public Safety Committee. I'll go with Ms. Gorel.
Present.
Mr. Fellers.
Present.
Mr. Zintak. Uh-oh. I think he got a little confused there on, he might have left us. Who have I missed on?
Arena's here.
Mr. Arena. All right.
It says public.
And Miss Red.
Present.
Thank you, Miss Red. We do have a quorum for public safety. Mr. Fellers, or I'm sorry, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. So let's take a roll call. Myself present, Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Here.
Mr. McDonald,
Here.
Mr. Butita, I believe he's not on. Mr. Fiducia,
Here.
Mr. Hoffman. I know he was on. So we'll skip him and go to Mr. Girl.
Present.
All right. Is Mr. Hoffman still online? I believe he was, but I don't see him anymore. So just let the record reflect, we do have a quorum. Mr. Booker, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. At this time, we move on to item C, which is public comment. Mr. Thompson, is there anyone online that would like to provide public comment tonight?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Next item is a resolution authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to agreement between Winnebago County and Remedies Renewing Lives for the Justice for Families Grant. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Ms. Gorel, second by Mr. Girl. Any discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an amendment to a contract between Winnebago County and Remedies. They want to amend the contract. They have additional funding for a position. It's a 3/4 time position, 0.75 FTE. They have the additional grant dollars to fund this additional position, and this, if approved by the committee and county board, would amend our contract with Remedies. And I believe Tom Jakeway is online as well if you have any specific questions regarding the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Yes, we continue to enjoy the benefits of grants from the federal government. Mr. Jakeway, glad to see you on board. And if you could provide a little conversation to this to enrich us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Booker. Good evening, everybody. This is a grant award to Winnebago County through the Department of Justice Office Violence Against Women. It's a multi-year grant supporting our services in the Domestic Violence Center here at the courthouse. And I asked tonight to join me here in order to give you some firsthand knowledge about that project, better than hearing it from me. If I can introduce Nicole Tickner, who's on the line with us here. Nikki, if you could please let everyone know what we're doing with this grant for the good of our community.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to join you this evening. This is our Justice for Families grant, and this is a 2-year grant, as Tom said, from Office of Violence on Women. And this grant really works to sustain the work of our domestic violence court. It provides funding for myself, project manager position, as well as some case docket coordination and several advocate positions under this grant, as well as some money for training and consultations with different partners. And so what this specific position allows is for an advocate to assist survivors who are filing an order of protection in conjunction with a criminal case in our domestic violence criminal court.
Thank you, Nikki. I'll just add that this is a fully grant-funded project. There's no county match for any of these positions or in relation to this grant. We're glad to answer any more questions anybody may have.
Great. Anyone with questions for Mr. Jakeway or Ms. Tickner? Mr. Jakeway, I have a question. Do we have a wonderful grant writer at your office, or is this just something that the Department of Justice is just handing out to us?
You're looking at her here on the screen with I give all the credit to Nikki Tickner. She's the one who writes these grants. She's the one that's administering these grants. All the credit to her. Tremendous amount of work, and I can't speak more highly than Nikki, given this opportunity to laud her in front of everybody.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Jakeway, and thank you, Nikki. Appreciate all your work. This is a very, very important issue in our county, as in every community. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, we've got a motion and a second for the resolution authorizing the execution of First Amendment to agreement between Winnebago County and Remedies Renewing Lives. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next on the agenda is a resolution authorizing an updated intergovernmental agreement for the operation and funding of the Winnebago County Emergency Telephone System. Mr. Chapman worked with, I'm sorry, I better move for a motion. Motion by Mr. Gurl and second by Ms. Gurl and Mr. Fellers. Thank you. Any discussion on this intergovernmental agreement, updated intergovernmental agreement between the county and the city?
Yeah, can we get an update, Mr. Booker, whether Mr. Thompson or shed some light? I know there's some cost to it. I know it's been budgeted for 2021, but if they could just speak to it, I'd greatly appreciate it. If there's portions between the city and the county, who's responsible for the full amount, stuff like that.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Mr. Chapman, I saw your name on the memorandum that came out. Am I jumping over Mr. Thompson, or who would like to speak on this?
No, that's a perfect segue into Steve Chapman. This is a 32-year intergovernmental relationship between the city of Rockford and Winnebago County to provide emergency communication services. And Steve and the representative from the city of Rockford have worked on revising the intergovernmental agreement and has updated it. And I'll let Steve explain some of the specific details.
Okay, thank you. This is an extension of a current agreement that we have with the city of Rockford and the ETSB board. The actual agreement has been in effect, I think, since 2008, relating to the operation of the 911 center for the city of Rockford and the facility that we built for the county out by the nursing home. I worked with the chief, fire chief, Bergstrom, who's also on the line, to update the agreement. The cost is for the county based on the language that's been in the agreement since we initiated it. It's about $646,000. That was an item that was agreed to back when we originally did the agreement, and we just update that cost each year. That's included in this year's budget and has been in the past. We, as part of the modifications to the agreement, the previous agreement had a language in there about issues that took place prior to us building the new center and all that. So we modified that, took out all that historical language, if you want to call it that. And the agreement that's presented now reflects the current operation and relationships between the three parties.
Good. Thank you. Chief Bergston, is there anything you'd like to add to this? You're muted, Chief.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Go ahead, Chief.
No, I just want to just comment on, follow up what Steve said. Appreciate the partnership. Also being the chairperson of the ETSB board, we ran that through our board and our attorney, and all the board members are good with that agreement also. And just to continue this relationship. I know we've had several discussions and points over the last 3 to 4 years with this, and we just wanted to get this agreement updated and run it through all the boards, the city council. It will be on the city council agenda for Monday, and I know you have it tonight, and then also the ETSB board the second week in December. Steve and I are more than happy to answer any questions. We did update it, ran it through the ETSB attorney, just to clean up a lot of the old language so it's more streamlined. The purpose and the intent of it did not change, and we just enjoy the partnership, the ETSB and the city working with the county.
Right. Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I'd like to add, it works very, very well. And I think a lot of communities admire how well the county dispatch and city dispatch work together. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Mr. Salgado, is there anything else you'd like to ask or add?
No, that'd be it.
Great. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quickly, I'm trying to find it here in the packet that we received. I know a little while ago, the county 911 system had or center, not the system, had a little problem with staffing. The city of Rockford was nice enough to take over and help bail us out. It did come with an extreme cost, though. Has that type of situation been addressed in this updated agreement, that maybe more reasonably we can help each other out?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. I don't see Chief Saganek on board. Maybe Mr. Chapman might have some knowledge of this, or
I'm not aware, but I don't know if it occurred before I came on board, or so I'm not aware of. I mean, I don't know what the cost was if they charged the sheriff for the services. I'm not. Like I said, I'm not aware of that situation.
I mean, if you want, I could comment if you wanted me to.
Yeah, great, Chief. Chief Bergston, go ahead, sir.
So none of that language is included in this, and I will say that that agreement was to the prior city administration. I don't think we're going to have any issues. We've already provided services. We exchanged back and forth in the last couple of years without any issues. So that's been working very seamlessly with our current administration, with myself, and our new 911 Division Administrator, Todd Stockberger, along with the administration up at the County 911 Center.
Thank you, Chief. I don't know if that sufficiently answers your question, Mr. McDonald.
Chief Bergson did say that it's not part of this agreement. So it's something to figure out if we ever get in that position.
Excuse me, wasn't that just an agreement between the county and the city of Rockford? With the city doing our backup in case we got into trouble and we couldn't operate? Wasn't that how it was?
We actually did get into trouble and they had to bail us out. And
right.
The cost was very, very high. Does anybody else remember? I want to say it was $45,000. Dang near a week. Really expensive.
Yeah, Mr. McDonald is correct on that. It was. I mean, I think I voted against it because it was extraordinarily pricey and left somewhat open ended, and the board didn't have any control over when it got implemented or how it did. I just don't remember if there's a sunset clause in there or not, Mr. McDonald. There might have been, but I could be wrong. But definitely something for the next board to open up and review.
I'm not aware of it.
Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue was the disparity in the wages that the county paid for the same service, the same job description, what have you, that the city does. And so despite the hourly disparity in wages and so forth, then along with that, ancillary things that come with your payment, with your paycheck, whatever. I'm talking about insurance costs and legacy costs, et cetera. I'm wondering if that's what Keith is getting at.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. I sent a text to Chief Saganek and I haven't received anything back yet. I know that all this occurred during the Morrissey administration, the last administration with the city also. Is there anything else anyone would like to add?
I still think it's a contract just between the city and Winnebago County, the Sheriff's Department, our county board. I don't recall it being part of the 911. It's just was that if we lost our people at the 911 for some reason, we had I don't know, got struck by lightning or something, we were paying them like $15,000 a day, whether we used their services or not. It was very, very expensive. And that I do remember, but I don't, this is a 911 contract basically you're talking about here, is it not?
It's an intergovernmental agreement for the operation and funding of the.
But that's operation and fund. It didn't. I think that was a separate contract.
Yep.
Mr. McDonald.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. No, I fully intend to support this. The cooperation between the two agencies is very much needed. The redundancy needs to be there. I just, in the future, I would hope maybe we can address the what if situation like we do so often in the fire service, that if we did need to transition all of our calls for whatever reason to either agency. No, I fully support this. I will vote yes on this, but in the future, it'd be nice if we could address that emergency requirement in this document. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Thompson.
Maybe Steve can weigh in on this or the fire chief, but I think based on my reading of the IGA is that both agencies do serve as a backup for each agency. So if there's a problem with the cities, the county backs them up. If there's a problem with ours, they back us up. That's part of that agreement.
Right. Yeah. There's never any doubt that wouldn't occur. There's no doubt about that at all. The county has backup consoles ready to go in case the city operators need to come up, and vice versa. The city has consoles open. Yeah, they would work hand in hand if any such disaster, man-made or natural disaster, were to occur. That there's no doubt that we would be able to back each other up. Mr. Fellers.
Yeah, and just to Mr. Thompson, just to add, I think, the agreement that we're discussing was during a time in which we were concerned about staffing shortages within the county's 911 center and not being able to have enough people to operate that, in which we would essentially pay for the city to take calls and route calls for us outside of this. So I think this is probably something that should be brought up, researched again and brought up quickly within the next term, so it can be addressed and make sure that A, if it's still necessary, and B, if it is still necessary, a review of the costs and requirements for implementing such staffing backup.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Goral.
Was that the time that all of a sudden our people out at our Winnebago County 911 center got pink slips? Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that was part of the, that was the same time, right? Yes, it was. Any other discussion or question? Okay, seeing none, we've got a motion and a second for the intergovernmental agreement for the operation and funding of the Winnebago County Emergency Telephone System. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the resolution and motion passes. Next on the agenda is a resolution authorizing execution of the collective bargaining agreement with the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police Labor Council, representing deputies and the Winnebago County Sheriff. Can I get a motion? Motion by Mr. Gurl, a second. Mr. Fellers, got a motion and a second. Any discussion from Mr. Chapman, Mr. Thompson? Anyone? I know this has been a long time coming and there's been a lot of back and forth on this. This is, I'm sure it was a tough one. Anyone like to jump in?
I do have a question.
Yes, Ms. Gurl.
Since the staff out at River Bluff is part of this agreement, is it part of this agreement or is that a separate agreement? Mr. Kurlinkus?
Separate agreement. This is just the deputies.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I would like if they could give us a high-level, quick summary of the changes and the agreement. I know there were some percentages in the salary increases. I saw that from 2.5 to 2.25, 2.25 and 2.25 for the 3 years. So just wanted to see if they could give like a quick summary on it. I know there was some changes to the benefits as well, insurance and stuff like that. So if they could just give a quick highlight of the summary of it. And then if we have additional questions, we can certainly go into them, but just a high level summary of the changes in agreement, from the contract.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Hand up from Mr. Chapman or Mr. Thompson, Mr. Kurlinkus, Mr. Thompson.
I'll just start out. There's several staff people involved. Mr. Kurlinkus, the HR director, Steve Chapman. This is a 3-year contract. It's a 3-year deal. It incorporates some back pay. This is deals with 2019, 2020, 21. It's a 3-year contract. I would say it's a very good, fair deal. We did go through a full day of mediation with a mediator to try to settle the contract. The total cumulative cost of the contract is $1.2 million. $205,000 is the cost of the prior year back pay. $396,000 of current year costs, and then the next year's cost of the settlement will be budgeted. As Mr. Salgado mentioned, it is a 2.25% increase for each of the 3 years of the contract. And most importantly, it, and this was one of our main goals going into this, although I was not here at the beginning, was to resolve the differences between health insurance, between the FOP and the rest of AFSCME. And so we were able to resolve those differences. And so if this contract is approved by the board, and it has been ratified by the FOP, these employees will be part of the same health insurance program that we have with the rest of our county employee workforce. And so there's several TAs that are included in the packet that are non-economic. They are more language issues which were resolved between the parties. The economics, I have spelled out, it's 2.25% for 3 years. There is 1 year of back pay, retroactive pay, current year costs, and then future year costs. I think it's a fair settlement, although I was at the very tail end of this. Like to thank Steve Chapman, Mr. Kurlinkus in his office, and also the mediator that we spent a full day in mediation, and he was able to work between both parties. We went back and forth. It took all day, and I think overall, based on my review, it's a fair settlement.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, just for clarification, Mr. Thompson, and Mr. Kurlenkus could probably jump in. I believe the current rate was 2.5 for the first year, but it went down to 2.25%. Then the second year was 2%. That went up to 2.25%. And same for the third year, 2% went up to 2.25%.
Right.
So across the board, I just wanted to clarify.
2.25 for each year of the contract.
Yeah, correct. So I just
Right.
wanted to point that out too.
Yeah, it's the just to let you know, as we talked this through, I think most of the arbitration awards were coming in at around 2.5%. So as Mr. Thompson said, I think this was a fair resolution, and I don't think Debbie is online. She must have left the meeting. The insurance component of this, the health insurance component, was very contentious. It was very important. The deputies had basically a standalone health insurance policy that was not in line with all of the other employees, whether union or non-union, the other employees of the county. This brings them much closer in line with that now, and I think. Like I say, with the financial settlement, as Mr. Thompson said, the contract expired back on September 30th of 2019. So the first year of the 3 years, as he stated, is gone already. So that's the retro pay. We'll go through, and this one is set to expire, if I'm not mistaken, on September 30th of 2022. So we're set for a while. It was an arduous process, but I think the outcome was pretty good.
Good job.
Mr. Booker, I'd like to ask another question, if I may. Mr. Chapman or Mr. Thompson, based on the arrears in cost, how did we take into consideration whether that was part of a contingency or something like that to cover some of these costs, or how did we factor that in the budget, or if we did or didn't? I just would like to get an answer to that. I know that some of these contracts, Mr. Kurlenkus is aware, they expire, or the negotiating could be 2 years, 1 year, and so it's like I don't recall how we addressed some of that, but just wanted to get your take, Mr. Chapman or Mr. Thompson, on how we address those issues from a budgeting perspective.
I guess as far as the budget goes, the costs that were incurred for the last fiscal year, based on the accounting requirements, will be charged against last year's budget. As far as the current year budget, we did include dollars that would cover this particular increase in the current year budget. So we're covered in that respect.
Perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you. Just so I get that clear. So a budget amendment will not be required to make adjustments to the previous budget or to the 2020 budget? Is it a no?
Yes, I mean, as far as the current budget, it will not be required. Yeah.
Okay.
And Mr. Booker, if just for the record, I see Mr. Butita has joined us, so he is now present, just for the record.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Hello, Mr. Butita. All right. Arduous is what Mr. Kurlenkus says. Aren't they always arduous, Dave?
They seem to turn out that way. But as Mr. Thompson said, this was a marathon mediation session with the federal mediator, and I think we had a good plan. I think we stuck to it. I think the FOP was reasonable on what they came in with, and I think nobody walks away from negotiations totally happy. If that happens, then it was a bad negotiation. I think, but I think here, I think everybody was relieved to put it behind us.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Kurlinkus. Steve Chapman, this was your last process with the FOP, right? Glad to have it all behind you.
Gonna be the consultant.
Yeah, I hope so. I think I've been involved in pretty much every contract except one with the FOP. So yes,
25 years worth.
At least.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chapman, for all your years of work on these between the county and the FOP. Any other questions or concerns? Okay, seeing none, we've got a motion and a second for the agreement with the FOP and the county. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Wonderful. Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. That's the last item on the agenda. Mr. Salgado, sir, is there anything?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do have some one pending litigation matter to discuss in closed session.
Correct.
Real quick, if I may, Mr. Booker, before we go into closed session before the night, if that's all right.
Yes, Mr. Fellers.
Thank you. In case you all didn't catch the news, I just wanted to say thank you to the Winnebago County Sheriff's deputies, the Rockford Police, in conjunction with State Police in Georgia for making an arrest today in the murder of Tammy Tracy back from the 80s. So those of us that grew up in Rockford, of course, that was big news at the time, and it's good to send in the state's attorney's office as well. We all hope to see that come to justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Fellers. I was an officer, a young officer at the time, and it did well up in my throat a little bit that an arrest that has been made. That was near and dear to my heart. Thank you very much. Okay, so we need a motion to move into closed session. Motion by Mr. Fellers, a second by Mr. Gurl. All those in favor? Aye.
Wait,
Any
pause.
opposed?
Time out. I just had a note from our state's attorney's office that we don't have any updates on litigation. So I guess
Right.
is that correct?
Yeah, if I could, I think that update, I talked to Deputy State's Attorney Leclerc tonight, and she said she would bring an update in a couple of weeks.
Okay, very good.
I will rescind my motion then.
I'll rescind my second.
We got a rescinded motion and a rescinded second. Mr. Chapman is
Waving.
value waving here.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chapman?
What we did have one item, a workers' comp case that we needed to discuss in closed session.
I was
So,
unaware of that.
yeah. Sorry. So it shouldn't take very long, but it is.
Unrescind the motion in second.
I'll just make a second. I'll make a motion right now to go into closed session.
I'll second my second.
Well, okay, we have a motion to go into closed session, a motion made by Mr. Fellers, a second by Mr. Gurl. All those in favor to go to closed session? Aye.